What's up, guys? We got the A34 versus the Galaxy S10. So if you have another request, be sure to put it in the comments because we're going to go ahead and move on to another device. So be sure to do that before I do. And this was a common question. Is this a worthy upgrade? Is this a good upgrade if you're coming from an S10 and going to an A34? So I think that's pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So hardware-wise, it's the same story. Obviously, the A34 looks newer, right? It has a more modern kind of design, but it's still a plastic phone pretty much all around. So the S10 still feels just way better. It's a glass and metal. It's IP68 dust and water resistant as opposed to the IP67. And yeah, it's just gonna feel better. And you'll notice it does have a headphone jack on here, which I'm surprised they didn't put a headphone jack on the A34. Both these phones do have SD card support, which is very nice as well too. You will also see a pretty big size difference here as well, and it is also much thicker too, but they're both pretty comfortable to hold in the hand. Let's talk about the display. So the S10 does have a 6.1-inch dynamic AMOLED display, HDR10 Plus, at 6.1 inches, 1440p, 550 for the PPI. The A34 has a 6.6-inch display. It's Super AMOLED, 120 Hz, and then it's 1080p, 390 for the PPI. So no HDR10 Plus on here as far as I can see on the spec sheet. But yeah, the S10 does have a better display as far as resolution goes, and also as far as the design goes, it still has a more modern looking display design with the punch hole as opposed to the notch on here. But yeah, the A34 does have the 120 Hz, and you definitely could tell the difference from 120 and 60. So it does have a better display in that regard. But yeah, but the S10's display is really not that bad at all. It's actually a little bit better in some areas. And also it does have a curve to it as well too, which you may or may not like. The A34 is completely flat. Alright, so let's talk about the specs a little bit more. The S10 got its last major OS update with Android 12 One UI 4.1, and then it's running the Snapdragon 855 and Adreno 640 GPU. And then on the A34, we do have the Dimensity 1080 chip on here as well. And then you also have on here micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. The S10 is 128 gigs as well and 6 gigs of RAM. I think this model is actually 8 gigs of RAM though, but the base is 6. As you can see, the Dimensity chip looks like it's pretty much on par with the Snapdragon 855 chip. It's a little below in terms of the multi-core. But what will surprise a lot of people is that the Snapdragon 855 I think still does play better when it comes to PUBG and the games a little bit. I think the GPU is a little bit stronger or better optimized. But as far as like bouncing in and out of applications, yes, this Dimensity chip is pretty fast. As you can see, it's on par with, you know, an older flagship pretty much as far as the speed and everything goes, which is really, really cool to see that in these cheaper phones. So see here, open up Subway Surf. Yeah, so it's pretty much on par, you know, with this S10. The S10 is still going to give you a pretty good gaming experience. You actually get better settings on here, HDR Extreme, and it's able to play this at 60 frames really easily without overheating and stuff like that. So yeah, it's still a very, very good gaming phone. And like I said, you can get these phones, you can get an S10 for probably 150 bucks. Yeah, the A34 does a pretty good job, but you can't play at HDR Extreme. So yeah, so the S10 is going to play better, but the A34 is pretty good if you're a casual gamer. You don't play a lot of games, you don't care about having the best settings or whatever. It'll do fine for the most part, but if you are looking for the better gaming device, it would still be the S10. Let's check out these speakers side by side. Surprisingly, the S10 is actually a little bit louder. They both sound really good, and I like the sound of the S10 a little bit more. Yeah, it's definitely louder, surprisingly. Yeah, but the speakers on both these phones are really, really good. I do like the sound of the S10 a little bit more. It has just a more crisp sound to it. Also, both these phones have the under the display fingerprint sensor, which works really well, so no issue there. Yeah, so pretty much feels the same. And then you also have on both of these phones face unlock that you can take advantage of. There is a difference. Obviously, you're going to get software updates, and the S10 will not. But you'll see that you do have Samsung desktop support, which you lack on the A34. But the A34 pretty much has everything else. All right, let's check out the camera specs here. The S10 has a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto with 2x optical, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. It also has 4K 60 and a 10 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. The A34 has a 48 megapixel standard, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro. It shoots in 4K 30 and has a 13 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. So let me know what you guys think about the side-by-side stills. Alright, so let's talk about the battery specs. So the A34 has a much bigger battery at 5,000 milliamps. It's 25 watt wire charging. The S10 does have a much smaller battery, a 3,400 milliamp hour battery, 15 watt wire charging, but it does have wireless and reverse wireless charging as well. So basically the A34 is definitely going to get better battery life, but you are going to miss the premium features like wireless and reverse wireless charging. But this does charge slightly faster than the S10 as well. So it's a pretty interesting comparison. You get good battery life on the S10. I did a drain test about 6 hours, even for this used, refurbished model. But yeah, you will get slightly better battery life on the A34 for sure. Alright, so that's pretty much it, guys. Be sure to let me know what you guys think. Is this a worthy upgrade? And I'll catch you guys in the next one.